Good morning. I am Maggie and this is Bramble Blossom. I decided that I was kind of going to do a part two to the when, what, and how much video with kind of the indoor planning portion of things. As I mentioned, it's important to figure out when your last frost is going to be first, and then kind of figuring out what you want to grow and then plotting that out in terms of what that looks like for you in the space that you're growing. And I did a couple of example things on a smaller scale, and then I'll show you my actual plot that I did that is a mess because I go back and I scribble additional things in, but I will show you that. But I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what could potentially fit. And this is, if you need more specific guidance for something that you're particularly wanting to grow, then I can show you that. But here's just a couple of examples of both 2 4 by 8 foot raised beds, and then like an 8 by 8 in ground. So as you can see, this would be like the 2 raised beds, and you for example could do over here 2 tomato plants and 4 pepper plants, some bush beans, some zucchini. Anytime you're planting squash, I definitely recommend plugging some marigolds in there. The smell from the marigolds can help to deter squash bugs, and squash bugs are the arch nemesis of my garden. I fight them tooth and nail every year and eventually lose regardless, but that's kind of one of the I don't want to say pitfalls, but one of the struggles of doing everything pretty much organically, not using pesticides and all that stuff. So I fight them, I lose, but I take what I can get from the harvest. A row of spinach, maybe some mixed lettuces, and a row of radishes. And then in the other bed, if you wanted to do a trellis, you could grow a couple of cucumbers, a spaghetti squash, or maybe a watermelon or cantaloupe. And then maybe a couple rows of some brassicas like cabbage, kale, broccoli, cauliflower. Kale doesn't take up quite as much room as the other ones do, but cabbage and broccoli and cauliflower take up quite a lot of room. So that's not something that you would get just a ton of, but it would be maybe a space for you to try something there. And then maybe like a row of turnips, a row of bunching or green onions, or you can get started onion sets. I think our hardware sells them, and if you go to a greenhouse or whatever, they would have those as well. And then you could get, the bulbing onions if you would prefer to do that. And then there's a little bit of space down here that you could maybe even potentially do something else that's small. One thing that I wanted to point out is with my spinach and lettuces, I tend to sow those a little extra thick so that I can do kind of a cut and come again situation where I don't pull out like a whole head of lettuce. I do a lot of leaf lettuces, so we can just, if I want to have salad for dinner, I can just go out and snip what we need, and then it will continue to grow. Spinach will do the same thing if you want to do like baby spinach, and kale you can kind of continue to harvest off of. As long as you leave a few leaves there for that photosynthesis to keep happening, it'll keep growing. Then here's kind of an example of maybe an 8 by 8, still with I'm realizing that I didn't leave any space for peppers here, but again, these just kind of an example. So again, having a trellis in a designated spot and growing a couple tomato plants and a couple cucumbers and spaghetti squash or butternut squash, maybe some melons, something like that. As I mentioned in the first video, you want to kind of those bigger things, you want to dedicate a square foot per plant. So then zucchini, a couple of those, maybe plug some marigolds in there in between or off over here to the side. Spinach, lettuce mix, bush beans, some of those brassicas or peppers if you want that. Some onions, turnips, radishes. And don't feel like you have to have an entire row of something. If you don't know if you like radishes, just maybe give them a square foot, and you can plant roughly 16 radishes in a square foot. So that would give you an opportunity. And like I said, the turnaround on those is about 30 days. So that would give you an opportunity to decide if you liked radishes, you could have 16 of them. And if you hated them, then you only wasted a square foot. Or I don't want to say wasted, but you only used a square foot and you still have plenty of other space. So things like the smaller vegetables, like the root vegetables, the radishes, carrots, even you can do them in rows, you can do them in squares. Some people kind of like to do just patches of things, and so maybe an example of that would be, I'll just go over here because I have a little bit more space to work with. So I'm going to try and draw and record this at the same time. So maybe you just say, okay, I'm going to do radishes in this little square, and then you could try a square of a square of turnips over here, and maybe your family loves carrots, and so you could do carrots all in between there to give things a try. I think I mentioned carrots are a little bit finicky, so if your family really does like carrots and you are really wanting to be successful with that, most carrots are container friendly. And so getting some really nice, fine, loose soil from the garden section or from, a greenhouse or something like that, and putting that in a container and then sowing your carrots in there. Carrots, basically you put the seeds on the surface and kind of maybe push them down into that soil a little bit. And I'm going to show you some of my, if I can get my box open here. This is my organizational system, and it is not organized. One thing that I definitely want to note is this is a learning adventure for all of us. And so have grace with yourself. Don't feel like you have to do everything perfectly the first time. You're going to learn lessons, and you're going to learn things that work well for you, and you're going to learn things that don't work so well for you. I'm trying to find my carrot box here. Well, I can't, but I wanted to show you a couple of things. If you are going to start from seed, some things to kind of look for and consider. And I'm not doing a very good job of holding the camera and trying to open this, so I apologize for that. All right, so seed packages can be a little bit confusing. This particular brand I love, M.I. Gardner. He also has a channel, has lots and lots of good information there. So if you need some maybe more advanced information, he would be a good place to look. He's got all kinds of information. So this says to start the seeds 2 to 3 weeks before the last frost indoors, or if you want to direct sow them outside. This is for Brussels sprouts. You're going to do that up to a month prior to the last frost for the fall. It takes 5 to 10 days to germinate, so that means how long it's going to take to sprout. It gives you ideal germination temperatures, and then it tells you how many days to maturity. And then it tells you plant spacing and kind of the size, and it tells you how deep to sow it, whether it needs full sun, partial sun, if it's cold tolerant or not, and then when you should plant it, and then some other, like, prune the leaves to promote more buds. So a lot of times if something is container friendly, it will have a little picture. Let me see, something that's container friendly. It will have a little picture of a container on the back. Let's see. These guys are not container friendly, and I'm doing a terrible job of, again, holding the camera and trying to navigate that. Some things that I can think of offhand that are container friendly, like I said, carrots. If you are doing containers and you want to grow tomatoes in containers, bushy varieties, they're called determinate, so they reach a certain height and then they stop growing. Those tend to do a little bit better in containers, because I had tomato plants, for example, last year that were probably, if I would have had enough support that high, they were probably about 9 or 10 feet tall. And it's just really hard to be able to support that height in a container. So there are determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. The tags, if you buy started plants, the tags should tell you. If they don't, you can always do a quick Google search whether or not it's determinate or not. If you buy seed packages, they usually tell you whether or not it's determinate. So I get out this big old box of my seeds and I decide what I'm going to grow, and then I do my seed starting calculator. And this year I just have a regular old calendar. Last year I had an agenda planner type situation. I go through and I write down what needs started. So this is February. So in early February, in January, I should have started my onions and then parsley. And then starting in February, all of these things. Now, I will say, don't be discouraged if you see something that you wanted to maybe start from seed, because as you can see, like you can still start lots of things, the broccoli, the cauliflower, the cabbages, those kinds of things, lettuces, or you can find those started plants. I tend to my tomatoes and peppers a lot earlier than suggested, just so I have time to kind of make adjustments if I need to. But it also takes a lot more work, pinching off blossoms and those kinds of things if that starts to happen inside, which is a whole separate thing that I'm not going to get into a whole lot. So I get out my calendar and I get out my grid paper and I plot things out, and then I make adjustments, and then I plot things out and then I make adjustments. So do the examples I showed you. I had kind of 4 squares equaled a foot, but because I have to tape 2 pieces of paper together, I tend to do just 1 square is a foot. So as you can see, I have, my trellises, my arch trellises I showed you kind of outlined here, and what I'm going to grow up over those. And then I also plant some stuff that doesn't like the sun so much in the center, so I'm not wasting any space, and that kind of shades them a little bit. But I have my rows of tomatoes, I have my block of peppers kind of figured out. And as you can see, I've kind of gone in and added some things. I did want to mention, I know someone to me about really enjoying asparagus. Asparagus is a perennial, and so with that, they take a little bit of time to mature to the point that you can harvest them. So if you do like asparagus, if you want to plant asparagus, get your crowns as soon as possible so that you can enjoy asparagus in 2 to 3 years. And if you need to know where to get crowns, I can certainly recommend a business that I support. They are good folks, so I can recommend a place to get some asparagus if they still have it in stock. I just ordered some not too long ago, so they should. So that's kind of the planning piece of things, and I think this will wrap up this particular section of part 2 of when, what, and how much. Thank you for joining me in my happy place here at Bramble Blossom.